the eIDAS2 regulation will be put in force by the European Commission, European Union, and that has a massive impact on how digital identities may be used for interoperability between the countries participating on eIDAS2.
There is still the risk of fraud, right? And personal data coming into hands who should not have them, right? So how is that ensured? It cannot only be done by regulation. There has to be also technology built in, no?
I like the ambition or the claim that Worldcoin, World ID has behind to make the world economy available or accessible for all human beings. Is that the future?
Hello, Martin, and welcome to Zurich, to my podcast living room here. Great to have you.
Thank you very much, Carsten, for the invitation. Very much appreciated.
And thanks for taking really the trip here. You came a long way to be here with me. And I want to introduce you quickly. 3 things about Martin Zeisel. 1, a leading professional and expert in the digital payment area, Austria, Switzerland, and Germany. You are also a mobile wallet advancer in Austria specifically with the payment service provider there. And 3rd, you are currently, we cannot say too much here, working really in Germany on a national scheme topic, which is all about bringing this scheme to the ecosystem of e-commerce in the future. And you're doing some consulting there. So quite interesting stuff you're doing. And you have the ambition to always recycle digital identities, which I find very cool. So we need to get to this topic later.
Sure, yes.
So Martin, if I did not know you, how would I know that you are Martin Zeisel?
That's a very good question. I mean, taking the story about you and me, you can rely that I'm the Martin supposed to be sitting here with you having the conversation, but how did you get there? I mean, the story behind this, you know my vita, you know my role, you know my situation that I have a contract of work. Yes. And that all is relying on processes, basically, that in our context, human resources are managing. So you really have assurance about the identity, about the proof of identity, so that I'm granted an employee ID to go ahead. That is how you can trust that I'm the one who I am.
Okay, cool. But you mentioned already it's an identity and it's some form of digitalized. Maybe before we dive deeper, let's define really what do we mean by a digital identity?
Digital identity in reality is the foundation, so the aggregation of all my individual attributes that form me as an individual in the digital ecosystem. This means it can be, of course, a verification of my identity, passport identity, of my personal identity information, of my address, of my marital status, of my age, etc., etc. So all that is basically aggregated under a digital identity for the purpose of getting access into the digital world, the digital space, the ecosystem. Consuming applications, access to applications, access to products, to information. So all that is granted based on my digital identity.
And that is quite a lot. And it's uniquely to you. And it also comes with certain values. And it was very apparent for me when I recently read about this, that take X, take Facebook or any others of this multi-billion-dollar valuation companies, you divide their valuation by the amount of users, which are also billions, you still get to a value by user of the identity of roughly $100.
Yes.
More or less.
Yes.
So there's huge value for the identities that we give to these companies to, of course, get some services. So is then the digital identity an old currency nowadays?
You can say so. I mean, those companies you just mentioned, become issuer of digital identity on my behalf, if you say so. So I can bring my own identity to access to or register for a service provider that accepts this identity being provisioned by X, by Facebook, by Google, whomever at that large scale. And of course, for me, it has a value as a consumer because I can simplify the provisioning or the access to those services and products, as well as for the service provider because he saves more or less money in order to go through all the proofing process to verify that I'm the one I'm supposed to be.
Yes, yes. And then I think we also need to distinguish between the public available digital identity and the private. So here we were talking about the private, basically, or the commercially available, right, in the case of Facebook and the others.
Exactly.
But public are also there, no?
Correct. We distinguish there in this kind of social identities. So social networks, example again, Facebook, that are providers. And of course, an onboarding process to receive or get a social ID granted is a different one. Then I would be identified with my bank because they are regulated businesses. And regulated businesses has certain requirements how to prove the identity of me as an individual. That goes into liveness check, into passport check, into anti-money laundering requirements, etc., etc. So the quality of assurance as a result, for instance, a bank could become an identity provider on my behalf for a service provider is much higher than it would be of a social ID.
Yeah. And let's stay with this topic because this is quite interesting. I think here we also see some interesting solutions available, for example, in Europe, right? So can you maybe explain a little bit what are solutions that are available in some European countries which provide exactly this service, right? They give assurance, they can use services, you get access and so forth. What do we see there?
Here in Europe, some examples are a collaboration of industry segments, for instance, in the Benelux of the banks and mobile operators, It's Me. Of course, those are having...
So It's Me is a name of this...
Is an identity provider,
yes.
Correct, is an identity provider. I'm, as an owner of a digital identity issued by It's Me, I have access to social services, tax declaration services, banking services, etc. And that because the level of assurance that has been performed going through this approved process has a different one due to this fact of the regulated businesses banks and mobile operators are in. In that sense, compared to social ID, I have a different target and different value, so to say, I can provide in this collaboration. Other examples in the Nordics, for instance, Bank ID or NemID now, MIT ID in Denmark, or Smart ID in the Baltics. All those are identity providers with a certain level of assurance that grant me access to services where the governance and the quality of this verification of my identity verification is very much important.
And I think Bank ID is a very interesting example because without it, you don't get access to the Swedish banking system.
Correct.
You need it first. And then, as you mentioned, it's also traded. So you can use it in different use cases.
Correct. And there we already come a little bit into the story of recycling it because once the identity has been provided or has been proven, so to say, and I can reuse the identity for various services to access and to get information and to consume. That's, of course, a large benefit because I do not need to run through those verification processes again and again. So that's a real benefit for a consumer.
Interesting. So let's lift the view a little bit outside of Europe. And maybe we also touch then some public identity schemes. What comes to mind there? Far East, India, China.
Sure. For instance, India, and I hope I spell it right, is the Aadhaar identity system. I mean, there it's a must in the meantime or mandated that you receive your identity or you start with your digital identity using this Aadhaar identity system. And of course, there another value might be added for the civilians and the citizens in India because the social value in using this identity system is to grant access or get access to education, formation, social services, so that has not just the monetary value, it's really a social system value that Aadhaar can provide there, yes.
And you don't have physical identity cards in India, right?
Yes.
So it's only this digital one.
And other examples even in the African countries, but of course it always relates to how infrastructure can be deployed there because digital requires the capability to digitally issue and digital verify as well. So it's always in terms of technology, some limitations or requirements that need to be fulfilled.
Let's also touch China. I think they're quite advanced. So there's digital currency and digital identity in many ways, but also some challenges from what I read.
Yes, well, if you're born as a citizen in China or if you start a business, then you automatically onboard to a social credit system. A social credit system combined with your digital identity grants you, on one hand, if you behave the way you're supposed to behave, bonus points, credits, so you may get easier access to education, to universities, or other social benefits. On the other hand, if you don't do so, then you might not get even a credit from the bank. You might be having limited access to social services, etc. Same applies for the corporate side. If you're a corporate business and you have or participate in this credit score system, and whatever relates to how you employ people, what kind of misuse or certain problems may occur with your business ethics, then you get to the negative side. They have a red list and a black list. And if you're on the blacklist, it takes you ages, years in terms of that, to get back on track and be able to do business. So it can really be existential.
So sounds a little bit like George Orwell or surveillance, right?
Goes in direction of surveillance. If you compare basically the capability of cameras being everywhere and as well use your behavioral patterns in the scoring system, then you really go into a very detailed privacy story. Could not be imaginable in Europe, for instance, or other.
Okay, but quite advanced systems in some countries you just mentioned. How are we doing in Germany, Austria, Switzerland?
Topic again, recycling of identities. I mean, in just today or the coming days, the eIDAS 2 regulation will be put in force by the European Commission, European Union. And that has a massive impact on how digital identities may be used for interoperability between the countries participating on eIDAS 2. It's not just limited to the European Union, mainly there, but even based on an open source concept, countries outside of the European Union can join. It's fully based on standards. I'm just mentioning here OpenID for verifiable credential is one standard. They use W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, or ISO. For instance, mobile driver's license is one of the use cases that is made interoperable, is based on an ISO standard. Main use cases they look at is financial inclusion, financial services. So traveling or moving from one country to another, opening bank accounts should be possible. Authentication of direct payment should be possible. And mobile driver's license mentioned already, digital qualified electronic signature. So that are the stakes the European Union looks at in order to make it work and use those identities across nations.
So sounds from the interoperability very cool. Yeah, it comes to the topic of recycling identities. However, it means there is still the risk of fraud, right? And personal data coming into hands who should not have them, right? So how is that ensured? It cannot only be done by regulation. There has to be also technology built in, no?
For sure, but let's discuss where fraud prevention starts.
Yeah.
I mean, I have an own example years ago where my wallet got stolen in a physical shop because I had my jacket just hang over a children buggy and out of sight, out of mind. But the impact was very limited because at that time you immediately noticed wallet is gone, suspend cards, etc., etc. But imagine now in the digital environment, we talk about identity theft, about identity takeover. In a digital ecosystem, you not immediately would recognize that. And second, it could be really an existential problem for you, your family, and more. So in that sense, fraud prevention, on one hand, starts with us, with me, you, that we are more conscious and aware, of course, based on a clear communication channel of the stakeholders, warnings, what can happen, phishing attacks, maybe already on a regular base, daily base-to-base. But as well technologies. Technologies may be in a biometrics environment, may be multi-factor authentication means. This means you need to have a possession, knowledge, or inherited items, subjects that you need to collect in order to authenticate properly. Risk scoring systems that analyze your behavioral pattern and the information provided by transactions and more. So those are all is all a best combination to prevent fraud properly. Yeah.
And I guess, as always with fraud, it's like there's a fraudsters who are advancing their capabilities. And on the other side, you have to, as a provider of services, do the same, right? And ideally be faster. Yeah.
Keyword, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, just talking about biometrics, we know how Face ID and voice, etc., with artificial intelligence can be counterfeited, or respectively fraud could happen in that sense as well. So we need to be careful and find the proper measures for.
So talking about fraud again, Martin, the question is there a silver bullet to be always faster than the fraudsters, right? To protect really personal data. And it has been said that democratization or decentralization of data could be a solution. Talking about blockchain, DLT and things like that. Do you believe this could be a solution?
Yes, for sure. And just we're mentioning the eIDAS 2. In fact, the European Digital Identity Wallet that is introduced with the eIDAS 2 regulation as well is based on a decentralized identity approach. Very much important, but not on blockchain. It's in principle available over the web or those open standards, open source standards as well. But blockchain is and can be a foundation or contributor to enhance security based on how the process of mining and creating blocks are happening. However, I don't see being the blockchain the ultimate means in doing so, because of, we talk about ESG, sustainability, etc., resources that are used and required to mine there, even though you have the capability of proof of stake, which reduces the required resources a lot and can be an option. So decentralized management of data is a key for...
Coming back to making digital identities future-proof, I wonder if there's a solution that Sam Altman from OpenAI brought us, talking about Worldcoin, World ID. Yeah. So there's a scanner called Orb, where you can do a retina scan from your eye, and that is being digitalized. And apparently it is a very secure way of storing digital identities through this digitized retina. Is this potentially a solution for the future?
I like the ambition or the claim that Worldcoin, World ID has behind, so make the world economy available or accessible for all human beings. That's a very, very nice ambition. The concept used per se is, again, using blockchain. In that sense, the less resource-intense approach here with the proof of stake. And the concept always depends on how a governance model is behind. In that sense, governance is a community thing. Yeah, it's a social thing for sure. Question I would have is that the future? Because still it relies on a cryptocurrency, Worldcoin. Is it another one that is added to the various crypto coins already? How stable it is? You still would need to exchange it if you would like to use it in other economic interfaces, as an example. Plus, is it something that would pass the way towards regulated business as well?
Regulatory is an important topic here. So look, so lots of things happening, and the future is open as always. When you look at your job, and I have a personal question here for you, Martin, how do you actually, in this variety of technologies evolving around digital identities, how do you keep your focus? And how do you focus also your team in what you do on digital identity work?
Yeah. I mean, we focus on the subject of payment and identity. As the term says, our focus does not simply stop on verifying identity. We have the ecosystem of payment in mind. So in that sense, we clearly look from where does it start and identity proofing is going to happen, how the onboarding can be simplified for our customers and their end customers, and as well how secure and automated this process can happen. So we have this clear vision in mind to make digital onboarding as easy and most secure possible. That's our focus, and we are all giving it, on that sense, me as well as the team, full speed on making this work.
That's a great focus, making the life of millions of people more secure here from that perspective. And the other thing is, what I wonder is, you've been in this industry for quite some long time, but you're still very passionate about it when I see how you talk here with me. So what makes you tick here? What is it? What is this so special for you?
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about digital identity, and digital identity, as we mentioned already, is really the foundation to move and navigate in the digital ecosystem. So it has an absolute potential to be the disruptive feature in future to change someone's behavior in the digital ecosystem, the usage patterns, etc. We were talking about decentralized identity, still a lot of things to come. Improvement of data management, more control to the holder, etc., etc. So those are topics that are really, really, in my opinion, worth and very nice to spend and focus the time on.
Right. Excellent, and great to have you and your team working on this so diligently over the past years and the future to come. Hey, Martin, that was great. It was a blast, actually, to get all these insights on digital identity, things that we use all the time, but maybe not think always about it so often. And I think you really placed it well, how the development is going, what is available already in the world, but also what the future lies in front of us. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me. It was really a pleasure.
Always again.
Enjoyed it.
All the best, Martin. Thank you.